Good evening, and welcome to the No Montana Lecture Series, Movies in Montana. A few announcements first. If you'd like to be notified of other No Montana lectures, just add your name and your email address to the list back by the door, and we'll make sure that you get notified that, about the future lectures. I am planning another set, January 14th, 21st, 28th, and February 4th. So, okay. There's also comment sheets back there if you'd like to fill one out, we'd appreciate it. Tonight, Movies in Montana. I asked Clancy to fill out a little something to introduce him, and I'll read you exactly what he wrote. Native amateur history buff. Well, he certainly is that, and that's why I've asked him. And I want you to know that it took me like 2 years to get him here. So I'm very happy to have him here with us tonight. And also tonight, this event is being videotaped by the Missoula Community Access Television as part of the Media Assistance Grants Program to nonprofit organizations. So we will be getting DVDs of the program, and they will be cataloged and placed in our collection upstairs. And with that, welcome Clancy at last.
I'm going to try and rattle through the whole gamut of the movies made in Montana, so there's a lot of information. But my real interest is making Montana information, Montana history fun. I mean, that's the part I get out of it, keeps it exciting, is all the fun little stuff, the trivia, the just juicy little stories that aren't necessarily serious history, but I think it'd be a mistake to let them go by. But first, I'd like to thank... Oh, yeah, there we go. Give me some coaching. So, I'd like to thank Paulette for that kind of direction and a lot of others over the years. Also mention that Mary Beth Goodrich is the contact person at the Montana Film Office, and she certainly helped me collect a lot of information. And after the talk, there are several brochures, which if you want to pick one up, it gives you a lot of information about movies made in Montana. Also like to thank Scott of Hide and Soul for his help and information about Red Skies of Montana. Stan Cohn is here. He probably knows more and has more Montana history than any person living, but he's certainly been helpful in offering to supply information with Red Skies of Montana. Also like to thank Bill and Karen Jones, who were the owners of about half of these posters before I started being the caretaker of them. And I'd just like to thank June Moncure, who got me jump-started on Montana history several years ago. The info presented tonight isn't likely to be the absolute truth, but accurate to the best of my ability. The truth behind these stories, behind the movies, is a moving target. You really can't get the accurate story. There is no accurate story. And so I may be fast and loose with the facts, but to paraphrase Dorothy Johnson, when the facts become legend, tell the legend. And that's my goal tonight. Matt Maxwell presented a ABC mnemonic of guiding medical behavior to the staff here a few nights ago, and I thought that mnemonic applied to my involvement in the arena of public speaking. The ABCs are admit to nothing, blame someone, criticize roundly, deny everything, and exit early. So that'll get me a long ways. Now, one note seriously, I'm going to spend quite a bit of time tonight talking about a poster I don't have. The reason I don't have it is it's for sale in Pennsylvania and I could buy it, but it's mounted on linen. And I think that there's a popular myth among people who collect movie posters that having them mounted on linen is a better way to store them. And Don Williams, the senior conservator with the Smithsonian, says no, you don't want to glue these things to anything, that the glue accelerates deterioration of the paper. So if possible, avoid these paper items, movie posters specifically, if they are mounted on anything even linen. Okay, now we'll get started. So I thought maybe there'd be little kids, you know, littler than Cedric Ames in the audience, and I was going to throw them prizes for taking part in the talk, because I'd like to have it as interactive as possible. Feel free to stop me, ask questions, clarify things, anything you want. And I bet you have information of which I'm unaware. So first question of the night: when was the first movie made in Montana? For a hairball right out of the corner of the library. First movie made in Montana. When do you think it was? Last century?
26.
Close?
1897.
1897. There you go. And that's excellent. Isn't that something? And it was probably a promo done for the Northern Pacific Railroad by none other than Edison. And it's a tourist train leaving Livingston. And they were promoting tourism in Yellowstone Park. Yellowstone Park had been a park at that time for, what, 25 years. And of course, the more people they could attract to Yellowstone Park, better for the railroad. So I think it was done by Edison as a promo for the NP. The next one was filmed by Edison in 1900 in Overland Express arriving in Helena. But the first two probably real movies I don't have any information about whatsoever. 1920, The Devil Horse, filmed in the Hardin area and Where the River Rises in Columbia Falls, and I know nothing about them. So the first big movie that I know anything about, I don't have the poster for. Is this going to work? Does this sound right? Okay. Yeah, The Big Trail. The Big Trail, I won't show it up. I want to ask you a question first. The Big Trail was filmed at the National Bison Range and the Flathead Valley, and it was the first significant horse opera, or first significant Western epic. It was the first big Western epic. The star that they wanted, Gary Cooper, was unavailable, and they chose a young, strapping actor, stagehand named Marion Morrison, and because of this epic movie, he changed his name. Now, you did pretty good on the first one, so I'm going to save the good ones for later. This time you get a Montana trout. Who was the star of Big Trail?
John Wayne.
Yes, because of this movie, here you go. Because of his success with this movie, he changed his name to John Wayne. So that's apparently what the broadsheet looks like, but that's all I've ever seen. The other piece of trivia that I thought was interesting is that while that movie was being made, John Wayne stayed, I think this was in the Missoulian, John Wayne stayed at the Florence Hotel. And to avoid public scrutiny, he utilized the tunnel under Higgins Avenue and shopped at the Merc. And apparently the tunnel's gone, but the door to the tunnel is still there. Now, a little gap in Montana movie history. No big movies made between 1931 and 1950. So I thought I'd fill the gap with this poster. Bill and Karen Jones owned this poster, and has nothing whatsoever to do with Montana that I know of, except the title. But who could turn it down? The colors, the quality, and the title. So I had to get it. But the other neat thing is it starred Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn had a reputation as a ladies' man, a reputation to the extent that it entered our lexicon of our culture as in like Flynn, with good reason. In fact, a friend of mine's mother had an affair with Errol Flynn, a fact that she was proud of till the day she died. So you couldn't turn out a poster like that. Yeah. Okay. I have no idea when that movie was made. I just made up that it might have been made in the 30s and thought I'd throw that in. And the next movie, Red Skies of Montana, was originally filmed the summer before it was finally filmed. And in that first attempt, who was to take the lead? Who was the star of Red Skies of Montana for the filming in the summer of 49, I think it was. 50? Was the final version, I always thought the first version was filmed in 50, and the one we see came out in 51. Okay, okay. So then, who was the famous movie star destined to take the lead, Red Skies of Montana, in the filming in the summer of 1950?
The guy that played Paladin.
No, but that's a good guess. You get a trout for that. And you get a hairball for that. There you go, Sasha. Victor Mature, unfortunately, insisted on doing his own stunt work and broke his leg in a motorcycle crash. That ended filming for the summer of 1950. They came back in the summer of 51. Stan, keep me on track if I'm not anywhere close. And this time with Richard Widmark in the lead. And I think everybody here probably knows something about Red Skies of Montana. It's roughly the story of the Man Gulch fire, which occurred in August of 1949. Certainly our local people were involved. My involvement was...
Was that filmed here at Hale Field? Part of
Yes, yes,
Yeah?
part of it was. It was essentially filmed in the Missoula area. One little tidbit, there's a scene in there of the Radio Shack, and in that Radio Shack still exists. It's up at Whitaker Park. It's part of the park system now. And Ed Heilman wrote a nice little monograph on the Radio Shack. Excuse me. But in the movie, in that scene in the Radio Shack, if you look in the background, Charles Bronson is standing in the background, and there's another movie star in the background that I can't remember.
Richard Crenna.
Richard Crenna, that's right. My involvement was Keith Pilgrim and I were buddies growing up in Plains, and we were 8 years old when we saw that movie, and we decided we wanted to jump. And we ended up going through school for 12 years together. Then we went through 2 years of college together, and we ended up jumping for 2 years together. And he went on to fly jets for the Navy, and I went on to drive taxi cab. No, I made that part up. But the neat thing was that when he and I jumped in '64, a lot of the people involved in the Man Gulch fire were still there. They were the overhead. And Earl Cooley, my boss, was the spotter, the guy that kicked those guys out of the DC-3 on Man Gulch. And I can't remember one of our fire bosses, whose name Al Kruger, was in charge of the detail to recover the bodies. And these were the people I was working with. So it really, gave you a connection. One other thing that didn't show up until late, and this was in my office, I found out that Bill Carver, one of my patients, had been a smoke jumper squad leader. And he was sitting in that chair, and his wife Betty came in and she says, "Well, you realize that's Bill in the poster." I know, what? What are you talking about? So it turns out that Bill had been a smoke jumper squad leader, which I hadn't known. I'll bet you Stan didn't know this story. And Forest Service had taken a bunch of pictures of the training procedure. And since he was the foreman, it was his picture they took. And he gave me the picture of him that the artist used to draw the poster. And you can actually, tell when you look at the picture of Bill and look at the poster, it does look like Bill. I was flabbergasted. And not too long after that, both Betty and Bill were gone. So I was kind of glad I was able to put that all together when I did. Let's show Timberjack here next.
You know a smoke jumper named Jack Demmons? A smoke jumper named Jack Demmons?
Jack Demmons.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Demon, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
He's here tonight, as a matter of fact. He's up doing his research on butter.
He's been, I think, instrumental in writing the Smoke Jumper newspaper, the National Smoke Jumper Association paper. I think he was one of the first writers for that. Yes?
I'm wicked new to the area that's in Boston. People say wicked. Could you just give a 1-minute thing of this big fire and
Oh, sure.
story?
I've forgotten exactly the date, August 16th? 19th? It was the first
This is 6, I'm not, I have to go back and look.
August of 49, and the jumpers, 16-man crew, 15-man crew, and 1 ground pounder were involved, but they had jumped into essentially a box canyon, and the wind shifted and caught them on a steep hillside, and it led to a big controversy. Wag Dodge was the foreman. He lit a backfire, yelled for men to get in the backfire with him and they'd be safe. One did, the rest of them ignored his orders, tried to outrun the fire up the hill, and they were found in various locations along the hill where they didn't make it. 2 made it through the line of rocks at the top of the ridge, Heilman and Salee, and died of their burns later. Heilman did. Salee survived.
He's the only survivor of 3.
Yeah. And he's been to several smoke jumper reunions. This was over at the Gates of the Mountains. So when my first fire jump was up at Libby, my second fire jump was over in that area, and they brought us out to Meriwether Campground, and a whole bunch of people got together and brought a barge up to the campground when we were being, the Forest Service brought the barge up, but a lot of the tourists and people that were camping in the campground went into Helena in their boats and bought beer and came back and started throwing cases of beer onto the barge. And so they decided, well, they might as well take us up and show us Man Gulch. So we went up by barge and parked off the mouth of Man Gulch and had an opportunity to see this from that perspective. So this is something that, is I guess fair to say part of Missoula, Montana culture. And Norman McLean's last book, Young Men in Fire, would be a good summarized way to learn about Man Gulch. It was in Life magazine. If anybody has an issue of Life magazine with the Marlboro Man on the cover, I would be interested in buying it. It has the story in there of the Man Gulch fire. And this one, interestingly enough, nobody seems to have kept track of much of the information about Timberjack. It isn't mentioned by the Montana Film Office, for starters. In the list that I have, which comes from a different source, it states it was released in 1951, and it in fact was world premiered in Missoula in 1955. And Phil Barney, a buddy of mine, was a kid here in Missoula and remembers going to the world premiere. Cedric watched the parade as it went across Higgins. Your dad, was it?
I was with my uncle.
Your uncle made him get off the bridge because he thought with the loaded logging trucks going across the bridge, the whole darn thing would collapse. But Herbert J. Yates produced Timberjack. It was in fact released in 1955. It says world premiere, Fox and Roxy Theaters, February 4th, 1955. This is a big deal for us kids because it was filmed right here in Missoula and the Blackfoot Valley.
And that train is still out at Fort Missoula.
That's true. Yes, you're right. The only really other piece of trivia that I'm aware of is that I think Vera Ralston got the lead because she was married to Herbert Yates, the producer.
Thank you. May I tell you about real quick?
You bet.
Loudly, stand next to the building. Speak loudly.
Okay. Sterling Hayden was in the OSS during the war in Italy or Yugoslavia. Vera Ralston was Czechoslovakia's premier figure skater and skated with Sonja Henie at the 1936 Olympics in Germany. And she escaped from Czechoslovakia in 1940, came to New York and was in the Ice Capades. Herbert Yates saw her, brought her out to Hollywood, and they got married, and she played with John Wayne. I talked to her in person before she died in Santa Barbara. And when we showed the movie, I thought everybody was dead. And then after Mia Andrews at Missoula found Vera Ralston in Santa Barbara after we showed the movie. It's too bad because we could have brought her up. That would have been a real treat. And a very interesting lady, Czechoslovakia originally.
That's wonderful information. Thanks, Dan. That's good. I had no idea. The next, I don't have a poster for this one, and it's because it's the Cattle Queen of Montana, and it's on, so far the only one I can find is backed on linen, and I'm holding off until I can get a better copy. Filmed in the East Glacier area, and there's a lot of rich trivia associated with this one. It starred Ronald Reagan and Barbara Stanwyck, and it was supposed to be the story of Libby Smith Collins, who was the original cattle queen of Montana, who had a cattle ranch over in the Choteau area. And she had married Nathaniel Collins in 1874, and he was working with Tommy Cruise when he discovered the Drumlin mine in what is now Marysville. The little story that I know of Libby Smith Collins' life that I thought was worth telling is, in her later years, she had taken a partner, Frank McPartland, and they had a mining claim on Lake McDonald. The mining claim was on Border Creek, which is near going to the Sun Mountain, and they were in a rowboat going to their mining claim. They left from the Snyder Hotel, and for a trout, the Snyder Hotel is now what? Maybe. It's the Lake McDonald Lodge.
Lake McDonald Lodge.
But it was originally the Snyder Hotel. So they took off in a rowboat. Apparently Frank in the front, Brother Chan rowing in the middle, and Libby in the back with the whiskey jug. Well, independent reporters in Kalispell had mentioned that they had spent the day quarreling and drinking before they ever got in the rowboat. And Frank proceeded to go for the whiskey jug that Libby had, and observers state that Brother Chan whacked him over the head with the oar to keep him from getting the whiskey. He fell overboard, capsized the boat. So then Libby's on one side, Brother's on the other. They're holding hands across the keel to stay afloat. But Frank, it got heavy clothes on, hobnail boots, pistol, ammo belt, prospector pick, and he's hanging on by her cloak, which is a Dorman cloak with a chain. Well, it begins to choke Libby, so she takes the chain off. Frank and the cloak go to the bottom, and they come out from the Snyder Hotel to rescue those two. They can get Chan in the boat, but Libby apparently weighed well over 300 pounds, and they couldn't get her in the boat. So they called for the F.I. Whitney, was the local steamboat operating on the lake, and they couldn't get her in that, but they did get a rope around her under her armpits, and they drug her back to shore. Frank, before he had taken up with Libby, had been involved in an incident apparently in the East when he got into an argument with an acquaintance, and as a result he stabbed him and hacked him to bits. And this was over the size and shape of Rhode Island. So I'm not sure the character of Frank, but Libby in her later memoirs said that his loss was mourned by all and felt by his partners. He was a true friend in time of need and always throwing out sunshine through a smile. The people who have known him have a soft spot in their hearts for his memory. That is, unless, of course, you argued about the size and shape of Rhode Island. So I intend to get that poster one of these days. Okay, the next one is the hanging tree. And while it wasn't made in Montana, it was a movie made from the book The Hanging Tree by Dorothy Johnson. She was born and raised in Whitefish and spent her later part of her life here in Missoula, lived up the Rattlesnake. And my connection with her was I helped take care of her at the end of her life. She was actually Jim Gouault's patient, but he and I shared call, and so I made rounds on her on the weekend. And I was so nervous because I thought, you know, if I use the wrong grammar, she's going to be all over me, like my high school English teacher, Irma Gertrude Schweitzer. And I had this image that I was taking care of Irma Gertrude, and, you know, but Dorothy had other things on her mind, worried about my grammar, so it all turned out to not be a problem. But the star of A Hanging Tree, Gary Cooper, as I mentioned earlier, Gary Cooper was unavailable for the movie The Big Trail. He turned down the lead in a 1939 movie called Gone with the Wind. And nevertheless, in 1939, Gary Cooper was the highest wage earner in America. He made $482,000 that year. And a little piece of trivia that you probably won't ever hear, maybe don't even want to hear it, is he had as much money as anybody around, at least anybody that was working for wages, and was a car nut, and had already owned a Duesenberg, and as a result of his earnings, had the company make a special chassis Duesenberg, which, you know, essentially the best car of the 20s and 30s, and this was a short chassis supercharged called an SSJ Duesenberg, and that was Gary Cooper's car, and his buddy Clark Gable saw it and thought, well, if Coop can have one, I can have one. So he had another one made up, and so these are the only two in the world, that SSJ Duesenberg, and the two people that owned them were Gary Cooper, and this example happens to be Clark Gable's. The reason I'm...
Was Gary Cooper from Montana?
Ah, gosh, for that,
Well, I'm sorry.
you're going to have a whole pool full of trout. Gary Cooper was born in Helena. That's the reason I've been going on about Gary Cooper. His parents were British immigrants, and I think it was his father, maybe it was his grandfather, was an associate justice of the Montana Supreme Court. But he left Montana to pursue an acting career in Hollywood, and being like most Montanans that go out in the real world, pretty naive. He made his own screen test. And so when he approached a director in Hollywood, he had a can of film with him. When they asked him, well, I'd like to see your screen test, he said, well, I made one myself. The guy had never talked to an actor who'd made his own screen test. The screen test amounted to Gary Cooper riding at full gallop toward him on a horse, and then coming to a screeching halt, ducking under the corral fence, standing up, doffing his hat, and that was it. That's what it took. And he hired him for the movie The Winning of Barbara Worth, and that was Gary Cooper's start. So the rest of it I've already elaborated on. He went on to being extremely successful actor and ended up appearing in another Montanan's film, The Hanging Tree. The next, I don't have a poster, but Little Big Man. Who starred in Little Big Man? Who had that? All right. Good on you. Filmed in Virginia City in the Billings area. The scene in Virginia City, in fact, is the Bale Hay Saloon. Great movie. I mean, everybody should see it. But talk about fast and loose with the facts. Whew. And that was in 1970. And then I want to jump ahead to another movie. I don't have the poster, but I have the picture on the DVD, Rancho Deluxe, and this was a screenplay written by Tom McGuane, a Montanan, and it's a entertaining but somewhat goofy movie. But for those of you who've seen it, the bar scene in Livingston where they go to meet their girlfriends, the guy singing in the background, For Another Fish, a genuine brookie from Montana. The guy singing on the stage is Jimmy Buffett. And of course he's singing Livingston Saturday Night. A few years later he goes on to have a big hit with Margaritaville. Bigger hit is he married Tom's sister, and so Jimmy Buffett is Tom McGuane's brother-in-law. Another interesting thing, that the scene where they go to visit their girls in the workshop is the Dan Bailey fly shop, probably the most famous fly shop in the world, there in Livingston. And now we're going to go to Missouri Breaks. Now, Missouri Breaks is also written by Tom McGuane, and it took me 3 full years to get his signature on this broadsheet. But when he did get it, he had signed it in letters 3 inches high, which I thought was wonderful. The other connection is the producer, Arthur Penn, also produced Little Big Man. And this was filmed in Billings, Virginia City, Red Lodge area. As you can see, it stars Jack Nicholson and Marlon Brando, and it's the only time that the two were ever in a movie together. Pretty neat movie to watch. I enjoyed it very much. Now I'm going to skip ahead to 1978. The Shining starred Jack Nicholson, filmed in Glacier Park, simply to mention that the opening scene is filmed on the Going to the Sun Highway. And next, have the poster for Heaven's Gate. I don't know a lot about Heaven's Gate. I haven't even seen the movie, but I thought the poster was too good to pass up. The one piece of trivia I know about Heaven's Gate, it was filmed in 1979, and the budget was $36 million, and it was nothing but a giant bomb. It just didn't fly. I don't know why, and I haven't seen it. I'd like to see it. But we'll put it up so you can see what the broadsheet looks like anyway. And while they're doing that, I just wanted to mention that same year, I don't have the poster for Heartland, but Heartland is an extremely well-crafted, warm portrayal of the hardships women faced in the frontier West. Executive producer was Annick Smith, who of course lives up the Blackfoot. Film and screenplay by Beth Ferris from Missoula, and it's featured Megan Folsom, a student from Missoula. Yes?
One piece of trivia.
Yeah.
The female Enchanta Farrell.
Yes.
She went to my high school in Charleston, West Virginia.
That's good. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to beat you, Stan. I really don't. She's wonderful. That's a heck of a good movie. Well received around the world.
And this film, Heaven's Gate, that was filmed where?
Heaven's Gate was Kalispell and Glacier and Butte.
And they redid the mansion in Kalispell as part of the deal with that too, because they filmed so much in that,
Yeah.
that building.
They must have dropped a fair chunk of change. The information I had, a $36 million budget, one article mentioned they'd spent $20 million in the Kalispell area. So had to help the economy a bit, I would think.
There's a roller skating scene in that movie, and my best friend was in it.
Excellent. That's good. So now I jump ahead to a movie made in 1983 called The Triumphs of a Man Called Horse, and it's a takeoff of Dorothy Johnson's short story, A Man Called Horse. And it features Richard Harris, filmed in Cook City and Red Lodge. And I've already mentioned my connection with Dorothy Johnson. It's a wonderful short story and a wonderful movie. She also wrote, of course, The Hanging Tree, and the other big movie was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And next, in 1986, The Untouchables features the Hardy Bridge between Helena and Great Falls. They wanted a movie. This was a story about the Capone gang and the Chicago crime busters fighting each other on the Canadian border. So they wanted a bridge that was fairly isolated, but had one geographic topography on one side of the river and another on the other side. So they used the Hardy Bridge with the mountains on one side, flatter ground on the other, to emphasize the idea of a border. And yet, you know, they're after that degree of realism, but this is a 20s, 30s era movie, and they're chasing each other around on horses because it's much more romantic than chasing each other around on Model A's. You know, it made no sense. It starred Sean Connery, Robert De Niro, and Kevin Costner, among others. And quite well done. And next, in 1989, you go ahead and put River Runs Through It up if you want. But next, just a word about 1989 Always was filmed at the Libby Airport, starred Richard Dreyfuss. And Interesting thing about this movie, they put off making the movie until after the fires in Yellowstone of 1988. They used the fire scenes in the movie. And the other little piece that I know of, Jodie Farmer, a former great Grizzly player, was an extra in the movie. And then probably the movie that everybody knows something about, and I would assume most people have seen, A River Runs Through It, kind of maybe put Montana in the consciousness of the rest of the country, for good or bad. I think it led to a big influx in tourism, and you can judge that for yourself. But this particular poster, I felt pretty lucky. I have it signed by all the actors, and including Annick Smith and Bill Kittredge. So I don't think there are any others that feature all this. They were the co-producers, Annick Smith and Bill Kittredge. This little squibble up here is all Brad Pitt could muster, but Robert Redford signed his name, as did Skerritt and Craig Sheffer. Craig Sheffer was Norman in the movie. Brad Pitt was Paul. Tom Skerritt was the father, who was the Reverend McLean, was the pastor of what church?
Presbyterian.
Who said that? Presbyterian Church on South Fifth West, and of course it's still there. Also, there's a scene in there where Paul and Norman are visiting with their chums on the steps of the Carnegie Library, which is now.
The art museum.
Oh, you already got it. You get a hairball this time. Yeah, it's Carnegie Library is now the Missoula Art Museum. The piece I like about River Runs Through It as much as anything is that the father had the audacity to explain to the kids that all of the disciples were fishermen. In fact, they were fly fishermen, and John, the favorite, was a dry fly fisherman. He won the 1976 Pulitzer Prize for fiction, and didn't much care about that. What he really prized that year was that he won the Dan and Helen Bailey Award from the Bailey Fly Shop in Livingston to the individual who best promotes fly fishing as a sport. 5 rivers were used. They didn't use the Blackfoot. I'm sorry, I'll go back.
No, whenever you got a moment.
Oh, I was just going to explain they didn't use the Blackfoot because it was too modernized. They used rivers in the Gallatin area and the Bozeman area and Livingston to shoot the movie. They in fact used 5 rivers, one in Wyoming, to make up the Blackfoot. Cedric?
I catered part of that.
That's good. Excellent. Next in 1993, Forrest Gump, starring Tom Hanks. There's a scene in there where he's jogging across the country. He runs across a stone bridge near the east entrance to Glacier Park. It's his younger, more athletic brother Jim who's doing the jogging. He was the stand-in.
Nancy, we were driving up the highway when they were filming that, but they also filmed in a tunnel. I don't know if that was in the movie.
I don't know that it was. I don't remember seeing it. And Paulette had a picture on the brochure for this talk featuring the Horse Whisperer. I don't have any information. I haven't seen the movie, but it was Robert Redford's second movie shot here in Montana in the Big Timber and Livingston area, and he stars Tom Booker. This is based on the life of another Montanan, Buck Brannaman, who grew up in Harrison. Yes?
Buck Brannaman's father-in-law was one of the Doolittle Tokyo Raiders, and I've been with him several times. And he was an orphan, and this lady took a whole bunch of foster kids, and he was one of them. And they live in Sheridan, Wyoming.
Oh.
And breed horses.
Apparently, the other thing about the movie, you should see it, is it's the best horse stampede ever made in the movies. And now, in 2002, a movie called North Fork, starring Nick Nolte, Daryl Hannah, James Woods, was produced in Great Falls, Augusta area, Glasgow area. So to start off the questioning, what was the largest federal works project of the 1930s?
Fort Peck Dam.
Fort Peck Dam. This movie is about displaced communities, displaced families, as a big federal dam is being put in. It could actually be Fort Peck. So in addition to having the largest federal work project in the country for that decade, the picture of the finished Fort Peck Dam is another thing that Fort Peckers can be proud of, and that is the picture of the dam is on the inaugural issue of Life magazine. A little piece of trivia, Daryl Hannah in her off hours swam at the Sip and Dip Lounge in Great Falls, where they have the tank behind the bar, and she had a bikini top on and a mermaid bottom, and swam in the tank. The Sip and Dip was rated by GQ magazine as the #1 bar in the world for 2003. And that's it. That's there easily got to be 50 or 60 movies. I skipped around a bunch. You can't begin to have the information on all of them. But I hope that it stimulated a little interest. I forgot to mention the one photo that June gave me of the pack train. It was used in the lead-in to Red Skies of Montana. As they're showing the information at the front of the movie, this is the scene in the background. And I would like to hand out, if anybody's interested, take those Montana Film Office brochures. I know Mary Beth would love to have that information distributed. And she's really helpful if you need information. Thank you.
Questions for Fred?
Oh, yeah.
Have any questions or comments?
Remember the movie shot in Hamilton, the bank robbery movie? I can't
Yes. Disorganized crime. And I don't have any information. It's one of those that I skipped over, but
How did you ever develop this interest?
oh, I think my dad was always interested in history. He gave me some of Frank Lindemann's books, and I always kept them. And then June Moncure was a patient of mine, and she was a history nut, and she gave me a lot of stuff. Some of this stuff was hers. And that really sparked my interest. I guess realizing that I'm born and raised here and I didn't know much about where I've been living. And so it's been fun to kind of fill in the gaps and learn more of the details and the trivia.
Great.
Russ.
I think Lonesome Dove was...
Return to Lonesome Dove was filmed in Montana. Yeah.
We have a very good friend, Don Harrington, at a Butte, who bought his cattle that they used in that...
He rented his cows.
Yeah, I just saw that here too. I was going to tell you what year that was. Disorganized Crime was in '88, and Return to Lonesome Dove was in '93.
Actually, like mentioned on Timberjack, it was filmed mainly at Bannerman Flats up to Blackfoot. Of course, the train was running at a mansion up at Polson, which is still in the distance, and then Glacier Park. And the sawmill scene was in Polson, I think it was in Polson, I'm not sure. But it wasn't filmed so much in Missoula, but they stayed at the Florence Hotel with all the actors.
Very good. Yes?
River Wild, I understand some of that is not the food banks, it's called River Wild, Mill Street. Everybody know?
All I can tell you, it's on the list, and I don't know anything about it, really. That was filmed not too long ago, wasn't it? Up on the Middle Fork of the Flathead, I think?
Probably, yeah. Although, there's some big
I've seen, I know the name's right here. I just saw it. The River Wild in '93. Libby and Flathead area. Universal Pictures. Senator?
There was a lot of filming, and I can't remember what movie it was. It might have been, it was either Timberjack or it must have been Red Skies over Montana, that they filmed at the courthouse, or the post office in downtown Missoula.
That was Red Skies.
Red Skies. And Mrs. Lester, her husband was a music professor at the university.
Yeah.
She was in a lot of the, or some of the takes of
Oh.
yeah.
Russ?
in that Big Skies over Montana, which was up in Libby, part of Libby.
No, that was always.
Always.
Oh, always, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All the log cabins were shipped in from California, and they were all made out of plastic. It all came in big pieces, and that's the way it was.
And in that movie, they had one plane. It was painted on one side so that all those shots were going that way, and it was painted the other way on the other side.
You got to save money. They should have been involved in Heaven's Gate.
That was an A-26 World War II
What was the
bomber.
name of the movie that, what's the name of the movie that Matt just finished, The Bridge? Sister Somebody, it's a story of the mother who had another child because her first child needed a bone marrow transplant. So it's based on a true story, and they just finished filming it up in Glacier Park, and it stars Cameron Diaz, or Diaz, I guess it is.
And one of the Beethoven, one of the movies.
Beethoven's second. Yeah.
Good film in Glacier.
I think that's actually the last movie I have any information on at all, but Beethoven's second. Oh, maybe not. A lot of good movies I want to learn more about, like the Slaughterhouse Rule. You were going to ask?
Yeah, the man who shot Liberty Valance, was that filmed here?
No, I just mentioned it that Dorothy wrote the story.
Okay. But it does refer to Montana history, I think. I'm trying to remember. At the end, the guy gets sent to be the senator or territorial governor or okay.
Yeah, I think Gregory Peck is a lawyer. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, he goes west.
Yeah.
Maybe just.
I don't know if it was supposed to be set in Montana or not. It wasn't filmed here, I know that.
Okay.
Has anybody seen The Hunt for Red October?
Yes.
And you know, now you might know better than me, but apparently the Sean Connery, the Russian submarine captain, says something about one reason he wants to become a friend of the United States, blah, 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 is he wants to live, I want to live in Montana.
That's right. That's right.
Or something along those lines. Or
Maybe.
before I die, I want to see Montana.
There was some pretty interesting espionage-related activities that smoke jumpers got involved in. I know there was some kind of a signal station on the ice floe, and a guy invented a method to pick him up off the ice floe by an airplane flying overhead. They dropped a balloon with a wire, inflated the balloon, and he was attached to the other end of the wire, and the plane had a device like this on the front of it that was invented by one of the jumpers, and they flew by, snagged the balloon, and picked the guy off the ice just like that.
Don't forget the folder over there, too.
Oh, yeah, I got one more little juicy bit.
Yeah, I was talking about Montana cruise. The thing with Heaven's Gate, that kind of went through Hollywood for quite a while, and there was a movie made, and they were calling it Kevin's Gate. And I was just wondering if you knew which movie that was, because there was quite a crew from Montana working that film in South Dakota, including Rusty, who has a horse that was ridden by the star, and he wanted to buy the horse, and he never sold it to him. And all the Blackfeet Indians who were in the buffalo scene are from Browning. And they were hired because they were cowboys to do the buffalo scene. Do you know what movie that was? That was Dancing with Wolves.
Oh.
They called it Kevin's Gate because they thought it was a 3-hour western.
That's good.
They thought it was never going to make any money, so Hollywood called it Kevin's Gate. After Heaven's Gate.
Made a couple of bucks. Yeah.
And the Indians that they had on the shoot, I worked on the shoot, they were from Blackfoot, the Blackfoot Reservation. And they were so excited to go out there and do what their ancestors did.
Yeah.
And right among those buffalo. And when you see it, those guys are using the exact everything that their ancestors did. Kevin actually fell off the horse in that scene. But the horse that he had, that horse that he had, that buckskin, stopped. Kevin got back on. And that horse he used throughout the whole movie. They had 3 of them. Kevin used that one that Rusty owns up at Kalispell. And Kevin offered to buy it, and Rusty refused to sell it.
I'll be darned. That's good.
But he did his own writing.
Yeah, Kevin
Yeah.
did buy it.
I wanted to just show this because it has a Gone with the Wind theme with the Missoula background, which try and figure that one out. But it's done by Monty Dolak in '82, and I just thought for Monty Dolak fans in the crowd, you might not have seen that one. I've never seen it before. It certainly isn't in the book about Monty Dolak. This one with a more decidedly Gone with the Wind theme is signed and inscribed by Monty Dolak. And again, I doubt you'll ever see it. I've never seen another one. I have no idea that he had done it. But it was just done for this Seven Gables Theater in Seattle. And I just thought it was interesting.
What's the building?
Well, I think it's supposed to portray the Gone with the Wind, Tara.
Oh.
The mansion in Gone with the Wind.
When you go down to the old main basement into the men's restroom, there's one of those and a Laurel and Hardy movie poster.
Where is that?
Old Main on campus.
Oh,
University
good.
campus. Down in the basement, you're going into the men's room.
Excellent. Good to know.
If you'd like to talk with Clancy for a few minutes, we'll leave the posters up.
I was going to bring a picture of Myrna Loy, also born in Montana, in Radersburg. And I think it's her picture that Monty did for the Crystal Theater, kind of an Egyptian theme. And one little piece of interest, Field and Stream had Myrna Loy's mother on the cover one issue, riding across the Tetons when she was 7 months pregnant with Myrna Loy. Yes, sir.
One more question. Why do you think the film industry has slowed down so much in Montana?
Well, I don't know the details, but I do know that every state now has a film office. Apparently, many states offer tax credits, and Montana offers a tax credit as well, but puts a cap on it. And it virtually guarantees no more big movies will be made in Montana. Legends of the Fall, the story about Montana, was filmed in Alberta because of that. So unless things change, there will not be any big movies made in Montana, big budget movies made in Montana.
Our state legislators to change
Yeah.
that, basically.
What was the reasoning behind it? That
I don't know.
like we can.
I know Brian Schweitzer is very much for doing whatever it takes to get movie and money back into Montana, but I don't know what the pros and cons or where the progress is.
What I've heard, and I worked a little bit in the industry, is that what they did is at that time, the political party decided that they wanted to make more money off them using our national parks.
That's right.
And so they raised that, and they also put the cap on it, and that drove Hollywood to Canada. But at that time, the rate of exchange was far better and had the same scenery, and we have not been able to get it back since then. It has to be changed by the legislature. They have to go in and remove that cap, raise it by about 20% because we're way low on the list to get to Hollywood. And we also must film our own movies here. Montana should have some kind of, I've recommended it several times where they have a script contest by Montanans and take the scripts that win it, and Montana should produce those scripts. And that's how you get Hollywood to come here, because they will come if you are in preparation and development of a film. But they're not going to come up here if they have to pay those taxes.
Thank you.
Okay, next week, on October 8th at 7 o'clock in this room, we're going to have Denny Kellogg come and talk about Herman Schnitzmeyer. And he does a wonderful program. Herman Schnitzmeyer is a homestead photographer, in Montana, and he also worked as a freelance photographer for the Northern Pacific Railroad. Any of the black and white photographs you see often are his. So please join us next Wednesday. Thank you.